We've 1 hour and we have to finish by 7:30 if we all want to eat, and we do all want to eat, don't we? Yeah, very much so. So we're going to do a quick 5 to 7 minute feedback session from the 3 discussion groups. So Julia and Murdo and Migo, yeah, will be giving the feedback. Then we're going to have a round table, a round room discussion really, with our 3 theologians and 1 scientist. So Bruno, if you're able to make your way up to the podium when you can. And then we'll see how much we can squeeze into 1 hour. So Julia, would you like to present first of all? 6 minutes maximum.
So, no, I will just say a few words. For us, the main discussion was the link between economics, politics, and the sciences when we come to the research, the relations between and how general marché, economical trade, is influential when we come to debates on bioethical issues and genome editing as such, considering the fact that are we free to do our research as the research, or are we pushed by the economics and politics of our states, and how we can deal with the development in the research when we know that for some questions, for example, you can do something in one country and in the other you are not able to proceed. How to integrate those questions when we are speaking of the research as such and of the reflection? Do we have a kind of we have a system of organization as a society which force us to figure out our research and our thoughts? Are we free to go beyond the systems in which we are in some way integrated? Is there any possibility to go forward?
Thank you. And that took exactly 2.5 minutes. So, Murdo, no pressure. You can borrow 30 seconds from Julia if you want, but that's the most.
Thank you, Julia. Yeah, we had quite a wide-ranging discussion around a number of issues that you've touched on, but we kind of started with a question around unforeseen consequences, which obviously are by definition unforeseen, but how do we deal with the uncertainty around that? And we had the great benefit of having Robin in our group, so he was able to explain that the risk-benefit equation would be one of the approaches that would be taken as we ask that question. There was a number of questions around the paper that was circulated from the group. There was some discussion and some disagreement, I think it's fair to say, about the conclusion in particular. And I think there was quite a sense that, well, first of all, there was also a question around the purpose of the paper. What was the paper intended to achieve? And I think that it's fair to say that as a group, we also wrestled with that while we were developing the paper. So the issue, because this is a paper from a Conference of European Churches working group, where there's a wide variety of theological positions represented, there was never any intention that this would be seen as being a full and final statement that would be accepted by all of the churches within the Conference of European Churches. But nonetheless, we felt that it was important that these issues were discussed in an accessible manner, and that there was something produced that allowed member churches to bring that back to their particular organisations and take that forward. But as we said, the question around what we do and how we proceed, the conclusion at the end of the paper was debated within the group, both the working group and also the discussion group this afternoon. Questions around different legislations. Again, a big issue across Europe. There are different legislations where some are more permissive than others in different areas, and I think there's how we deal with that. But questions around not only whether legislation exists in a country, but how it's policed, how it's overseen, is another issue. And Robin obviously touched on that in his talk earlier. We heard a very interesting idea from one of the participants. They talked about bring your vicar to the lab. So the idea of not just having the churches and the science communities completely separate, but bringing those of us who are within the churches into contact with real live scientists, and saying that we are interested in the work of those who are involved in science, and getting engaged around that issue. And I think that's an interesting idea. I don't know how feasible it would be in all situations, but I think certainly that seems
Murdo, you're into your borrowed 30 seconds.
Well, I was almost finished anyway, so I think I've said enough about vicars. We don't have vicars in Scotland anyway, do we? So, and yeah, that was the first question, was whether the group would be conducted in English or Scottish. So,
not Irish.
We had no Irish people in our group.
If anyone needs the conference interpreted into Irish, I'll do that. Migo, then, please. Thank you very much, Murdo.
Actually, we had so many questions that I would not be able to cover them in 7 minutes. But I tried to sum them up. We really appreciated the morning session because we got so much information. And we felt that it is really needed in our churches, that we would know what is going on, and maybe even the document we can produce is helpful in this regard, that we are describing the field. So it was appreciated. As far as theology and theological approaches are concerned, we realize that there are differences, but sometimes we don't really get the difference even in between our churches. And so maybe it's up to every church to really make up their mind. And this is what we can encourage. We felt that and there is a very gray zone between therapy and enhancement. And we heard theologians saying that therapy good, enhancement bad. But how do we define that line? And maybe here you can help us, really. And then maybe final comment would be on so-called preventive medicine, because we go to that direction also. We had this analogy of glasses. You know, we wear glasses. We don't have a question about that. You know, if you change your eyesight with glasses, but when we want to prevent something happening, possibly, how far we can go with that. And there were so many other questions, but maybe the final comment was also about the control. The public arena wants to control the decisions. And from the science point of view also, it's important to give people opportunity to choose. And also churches maybe need to be aware of that people want to choose. And this freedom should be given there. I think that's all in a very short comment.
Thank you very much indeed. Well done. So what we're going to do now is we're not going directly to discuss the feedback, because there will be discussion of the paper that's been presented. Thank you. There will be discussion of the paper that the Working Party has presented tomorrow, and further opportunities to pick up those points. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to pick out a few areas of particular interest, at least for me, from our speakers this morning and this afternoon. I'm going to ask two of the members of the panel to comment on the question that I'm asking. Then I'm going to open that up to the floor, and then we'll move on to the next question. The panelists don't know which questions they're getting because I haven't finished writing them yet, and they don't know whether they'll be given the question that they really would want to. So the first issue that I want our panelists to look at, and then I really want you to pitch in. You've been much too well behaved so far at this conference, so pitch in with your answers. And one word of caution to the panelists, I want your language to be inclusive. Now, when we talk about inclusive language, we often mean gender and something like that. By inclusive, I mean if someone enters the room who knows virtually nothing about science or theology, they will still understand what you're saying. So that's it. You not only have to speak theology and science, you also have to translate it. So the first question I have is the principled pragmatism of science that I think, Robin, you were suggesting this morning.
Inclusive?
Mm-hmm. Pragmatism, we know what being pragmatic means, don't we? We know what principle is. Over against perhaps the rather more dogmatic approach of theology. Can these two things really be partners? Or are we just being nice to each other and pretending that they can? So first of all to you, Robin, and then Bruno. So I'll give you a little moment to prepare. Robin and Bruno for this one.
I think if you look at the motives behind things, it helps a little bit. So if the motive of the scientist or the clinician is to do good, to help individuals, help couples. Sorry.
You can just hold it if you prefer.
No, I'm not. So it's talking about if you look at the motives, I think that helps. So if it's to do good for an individual, for a couple who want to have a child, to have healthy individuals who can lead a happy, full life, then surely the aims are the same, whether you're coming from the science perspective or theological perspective. And so I think there has to be common ground there.
Thank you, Bruno. And then we'll hear from the floor. So we want not just your questions, but your comments and your thoughts.
Is it possible for me to have a translation?
Absolutely. I will translate into Irish for you. But failing that, Julia will translate into English.
La rencontre entre science et théologie
The encounter between science and theology
ne peut pas être uniquement sur le côté pragmatique.
Uniquely on the aspect of pragmatical side.
La question du rapport entre science et théologie, elle se pose
The question is asked
sur la signification de nos propres recherches, de nos travaux, orientés par quel sens?
The significance of our works and our research, what sense are behind them?
Je comprends parfaitement une démarche scientifique qui consiste à étudier le plus possible, à transformer au mieux, mais quand on entend les scientifiques, ils disent tous « je fais ça pour améliorer l'être humain » ou faire en sorte qu'il souffre moins.
I understand very well the scientific research. When they are proceeding, they are trying to achieve better results, but the last intent is to, in some way, enhance human being to live better, to have a well-being.
Et donc, la question du sens même des recherches et des transformations, elle se pose également pour le scientifique. Et quand on pose la question du sens, eh bien, on peut se rencontrer entre théologiens et scientifiques.
So when we ask even scientists are thinking of the sense of the meaning of their research. So when we are on the ground of the meaning, there is a unique ground for theologians and scientists.
Et particulièrement dans la rencontre entre les scientifiques et les théologiens chrétiens, parce que tout ce qui concerne Dieu concerne l'homme.
And especially when we are speaking of the Christian theologians and Christian scientists, they are considering the fact of the existence of a God, and
tout ce qui concerne Dieu concerne l'homme.
What's concerning God concerns man at the same moment, same time.
Puisque Dieu a voulu se donner à nous en son Fils et nous a tout donné, y compris notre responsabilité, notre liberté de transformer le monde.
God is given to us through His Son, so it means that according to this vision, everything is given to us already in order to transform and transfigure the world.
Donc il me semble que c'est par la question du sens que la rencontre est possible. Pourquoi cherchez-vous? Que cherchez-vous à faire? Alors, on peut dire, je cherche à connaître. Ça, c'est bien. Mais en même temps, quand je rencontre quelques scientifiques, ils cherchent à connaître aussi, surtout dans les sciences biologiques, pour un bienfait. C'est comme ça qu'ils présentent leur activité, et pas uniquement une connaissance uniquement spéculative.
So, in my point of view, this ground of the meaning is unique for both sides, because even scientists, when they are thinking of what they are doing and what they try to achieve, what is the meaning of their research, is the well-being of the human being, which is at the same time the meaning of the theological.
Donc, de mon point de vue, moi, je remercie beaucoup les scientifiques de chercher à comprendre ce qu'est l'homme, comment il fonctionne, comment il est structuré.
So I would like to thank scientists who are dealing with what the man is, what is his structure.
En leur demandant, eh bien, quand vous allez appliquer ces connaissances-là de manière justement pragmatique, ça sera pour faire quoi? Et à partir de ce moment-là, la question du sens et la question de l'éthique se posent.
And I would like also to ask them, well, when you come to the application of what you achieve to find, what will be the meaning and
à la fois, du coup, quand se pose la question pragmatique, c'est ce que l'on en fait, donc c'est à ce moment-là que se pose la question éthique aussi.
When come to this pragmatic approach, there is the ethical approach.
Donc je pense que la question éthique qui nous concerne tous est un lieu de rendez-vous majeur pour les scientifiques, les théologiens, les économistes, les hommes politiques.
So when we think of ethics, this is a unique ground of politicians, scientists, theologians, economists.
Et le spécifique d'une approche catholique, c'est de partir de la notion de personne.
And so when we come to the Catholic approach, it's to start from the concept of person.
Okay, so we are in danger of peace breaking out, I think, between the theologians and the scientists. We're going to the floor. No one else from the panel. I'm going to give you a different question. Any comments or questions, if you're prepared to answer them yourselves, from the floor, and the nature of the relationship between science and theology in this area? Any comments? Are they willing partners, or is there an inbuilt conflict? Thank you.
Well, Hilly van der Streek from the Netherlands. I have a question about language, actually. I mean, the language in which the debate takes place. So what I notice in the Netherlands, that scientists and people working at the Ministry of Economic Affairs, they think in different categories. So they seem to have lost the vocabulary to have a discourse with Christians, it seems. So our values, if you speak about values, then they speak. If they mention values, they mention risk assessment, or just a few words which we, from the Christian viewpoint, think this is only one thing. But they don't have a faint idea that there is some other thing to think of. So we have to raise awareness with them, because the Netherlands is quite a secularized country. So we have a lot of atheists, humanists, etc.
Yep. So we can use the same words, but mean quite different things
or they don't know the words, or they don't understand the words.
Okay.
So that's the problem.
Yes, please. And yeah.
Do you recognize
David?
this problem? That's my question.
Thank you.
Well, je peux parler en français ou j'essaie en anglais? J'essaie en anglais. Don't you have the impression that your research is not as much guided by the well-being of humanity than as by the market?
Okay, any other comments or questions? I'm going to assume, Robin, the answer to that close question is no, but we will let you have more to say. Jackie?
It's a comment, really. Then.
Yes?
It's that just now the questions about the overlap or the difference, commonality between the church and science. And the church is lots of different things, just like science is lots of different things. And the aims of theology are different from the aims of a church, and which are different from the aims of a church community. And similarly, science has different overlaps and different aims. So there'll be lots of different, a whole ecology of overlaps and differences between those different aspects.
Thank you. Anyone else from the floor? David, please. Yeah.
A long time ago, when I was involved in genetic modification discussions and trying to understand why people came to very different views on the subject, I found a framework that Michael Banner had developed for looking at animal breeding extremely helpful. And basically what Michael did was to come up with a set of gates. And basically, if you refuse to pass gate 1, then any questions at gate 2 or gate 3, you just never approached because you just didn't approach them. And so gate 1 was basically a set of inherent ethical questions, which basically resulted in you saying, no, I'm sorry, this is just wrong, full stop. And so I'm not interested in cost benefits, I'm not interested in how it's going to feed the world, I'm not interested in how many people it's going to cure. No. And very many of the church views at that time would have fitted basically into that group of people taking a theological view of the issues and saying, no, I'm sorry, I just don't see that as consistent with my reading of Scripture. If, however, you passed through that gate, you got into a consequential gate, which basically, in a sense, looked at costs and benefits. And his view was that basically, well, the benefit really has to outweigh the cost by a minimum of a factor of 100, preferably a factor of 1,000 or 1,000,000. But unless, really there's a big benefit, because there are always downsides, just don't go for it. But that actually pulled out the consequentials and allowed you to box consequential issues separate from inherent issues and to see them basically as stages. And then it went on to gate 3, that basically if you got through gate 2 of saying, yes, big difference, you then basically got into what can we do to ameliorate. There will be downsides. Where do we put the regulations in? And that actually, in a sense, allowed you to distinguish the need for a regulatory theory, series of things, from consequential arguments, from inherent arguments. And I found that extremely useful in terms of structuring discussions and actually working out where theology sat, where science sat, and just basically understanding why intelligent people could come to a very, very different view of the same issue.
That's very helpful. I just wonder in the intervening years if Gate 1 has become more easily opened than it would have been, say, 20 years ago. But again, more for discussion over dinner or later. Robin, I'm just going to let you a very brief comment on the comment that was made about is it human welfare or the market? And then I'm going to move on to another question.
Well, as Jackie pointed out, there are different types of scientists. I would put myself in one where I'm motivated by welfare. I'm not motivated by profit at all. But of course there are scientists in companies who have to satisfy shareholders. They have to, for the success of the company, they're more motivated by profit. But generally, I think, if you take basic science, pure science, if you like, the goals are providing understanding of what of systems and understanding what is possible, how you can deal with issues. It's not the application of the science; it's the application of the science where the profit motive can come into it. So I don't think me or my colleague Kathy and I can be accused of doing this just to make money, because we're not at all. The whole enterprise of science is generally trying to do things which are going to be for the good of humanity. It gets wrong, it goes the wrong directions, it makes mistakes, and that's why, as I said in my talk, you don't decide what to do with a piece of technology or methods yourself. That's not left up to scientists alone or clinicians alone. That has to involve other members of society, and that's when the conversation with people from different backgrounds, whether it's theology, pure ethics, law, whatever, the man in the street, woman in the street, that's where that becomes really important.
Thank you very much. And I suppose the accusation could be made against the church as well with regard to televangelists and so on. Are we in it for the money or for the good of people? I'm going to move on to Peter and Miltiadis. No, sorry, I can't, because I've got to move on, otherwise we just get stuck on one question.
We don't discuss.
You can talk later, yep, if you don't mind. So Peter and Miltiadis, a very core question that I'm not sure that we've addressed directly, but we will do now. What, in your opinion, is a human person? And why do you believe that description or definition? Peter, then Miltiadis, if I've got the pronunciation right. And then we'll open that up to the floor.
I gain time to reflect on it. I think a human person, it is, I can't define what a human person is, and this is the mystery I want to keep. And I first of all, I would like to contradict and criticize everyone who tries to finally define what a human person is. A human person is, of course I could say, is a person born by a human being, by a human mother. But this is, a biological answer. And I'm convinced that the dimension of recognizing the other as another, as a mystery, a secret in itself, intrinsic secret in itself, is the most important, what we could say about a human person. But the problem is, when it comes to biotechnology, that in many cases we came to the point where in former times we said we have a full and clear distinction between what is human and what is non-human, what is life and or animate and what inanimate, what is living and what is dead. And biotechnology blurred these boundaries. And I think this is the challenge we have to cope with, to accept, to be honest with ourselves, that we produced new gray zones, and we have to be very cautious about these gray zones, because especially these gray zones are the zones where we perhaps risk the great adventure and challenge of what a human being is. That means that it is a being that can't define but lives in close relations to the world, to one's people we do love, and to those who believe to God.
Thank you. Miltiadis, please. What is a human person?
As I said to the previous answer I gave concerning nature, definitions are always difficult. So to speak about a person, we could say is a being with an intrinsic value that makes that person, that being unique. But we could better possibly understand the meaning of person when we combine the term person with another term, very common, the term dignity. We are speaking about a person as a being with dignity, with fundamental rights, or as Kant have said, a person is someone who has a value in itself. It is not a mean for a goal, but has a concrete value in himself. That's a person. Of course, from a theological point of view, the human is a person because it is created according to the image of God and the likeness of God. And that makes the human, because all beings are created by God, not only living beings, everything is created by God, but we say that human has that intrinsic value. It's different than other creatures because of the image of God. Because and the image says that there are features through which man is connected to God, but then is also the prospect of theosis. So I come back to my talk again, well, one could say many things about a person dignity. I think I could stop here.
Okay, thank you very much. Open to the floor then, with an obvious importance with regard to the question and what we're looking at over this conference. What is a human person? Your views on what constitutes or what ought to be treated as a human person. Any thoughts? I'm getting people scratching their noses and tugging at their ears. No? Nothing? Yes, thank you. Go again, David.
Somebody else have a go.
Yep.
I think in the context of the question as being raised, the important issue is basically that effectively it is something beyond the biological. Because if we look at basically what our species is capable of, it is basically the things around what we probably term ensoulment, and the ability to have abstract thought, and therefore, we would say, because of how we're constructed, we're able to appreciate God, to worship God, and to form a relationship with God. Now, none of those things are inherently traditional biological characteristics. And so to me, that added dimension, it's something which is inherent, but it's actually not measurable in a biological, chemical, physical sense. And I think we appreciate things like that. So, those of us of a more Catholic persuasion, when we look at what happens at the Eucharist, the Mass, I mean, basically, we see something happening, and we know that something has happened, but actually it's not something that can be detected by chemistry or biology. But nevertheless, we believe that it's real. And so to me, it's that added element which actually makes us human, as opposed to simply a humanoid biological entity.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to come in? Yeah, thank you. Doesn't matter if it's the same people again. Everyone has an equal opportunity.
Well, the thing is that economists and people at our government, etc., they don't use the word person, so it's lost in our vocabulary in government issues and economy. People speak, and also the government speaks about individuals. So consumers, people are seen as consumers, as autonomous individuals, and they are worried about rights of autonomous individuals, and they are worried about having a say, etc. So I want to ask you what you think is an individual, and then which words we should use in this discussion.
Interesting point, because people use lots of different terminology, don't they, to refer to the entity that we're discussing, life, being, person, individual, all sorts of things. Let me get to the really pointy bit of this then, Bruno and Robin. In terms of being a human person, in that context, how do you view the entities that we were looking at this morning? The single fertilized cell or the blastocyst or that very early stage of development where gene editing, if it happens at an embryonic level, it's going to happen there. Your view, Robin, then Bruno, and then we'll move on to the next question.
So how do I view an early human embryo? It's okay in different ways. So it's a valuable resource. We know that those embryos that are being researched on, not in my lab, by the way, it's my colleague's lab, that they are not going to be implanted, so they're not going to be allowed to develop any further than the period in the lab, which is a maximum of 14 days in the UK. Actually, for practical reasons, they're not really kept beyond about 6-7 days. So they don't have any I wouldn't see them as having a potential for, I mean, they have a theoretical potential, but they don't have a practical potential of developing into a human being. So they are material for research, very valuable material for research. They have, in the cases of the experiments done by Kathy, they were donated by couples for research purposes. So they have, if you like, a license from the couple who produced them to do that. So I think, you know, they're special, but I don't think of them particularly different from maybe having another piece of human material, whether it's a biopsy, you know, a piece of tissue, whether it's skin or brain or whatever, from a human being that's been donated for research. It has the same thing. It would be treated with a lot of respect and value, but its purpose is to get scientific understanding.
Thank you. Bruno, the same question, your view of the early embryo. Again, Julia?
It might be different.
It might just be different.
Bon, peut-être deux choses. Et puis,
Two things.
Je suis désolé parce que je dois y aller, mais deux choses. La première, je serais d'accord avec tout ce qui a été dit sur la personne que l'on ne peut pas définir, parce que le paradoxe, c'est que la personne est à l'image d'un Dieu dont il est interdit de se faire des images.
The first thing is that I completely agree with what was said according to the person, that we can't define it, and when we speak of the person as the image of God, we know that we can't present the image of what God is.
Donc, en quelque sorte, l'interdit de faire une image de Dieu, c'est qu'il est interdit à l'homme, on pourrait dire en quelque sorte, de se réifier, de se chosifier lui-même dans une objectivité, qu'elle soit biologique ou psychique. Voilà, je trouve que c'est intéressant.
We do not have the image of God. It's also might be applied to man, not to reificate the man, not to objectivize it, either in a biological way or any other.
Donc c'est important que la personne reste un indéfinissable, comme Dieu lui-même est un indéfinissable.
So it is important to keep the notion of person non-definitionable, unable to define, as God is unable to be defined.
Et puis la deuxième chose, alors c'est sûr que les catholiques sont très isolés dans la société pour parler de l'embryon.
The second thing that is the Catholics are very isolated in the world to speak about embryo.
Parce qu'ils sont les seuls à dire qu'il doit être respecté, non pas en tant que personne, mais comme une personne, dès la fécondation.
Because they are saying that the embryo must be respected as not as a person, not as the embryo is a person.
Yes,
but
embryo is not a person.
Is not a person, but as a person needs
mais
to
respect as a person.
As a person. Yeah.
Alors, c'est sûr que nous sommes, si je comprends, je regarde la situation, que les catholiques sont dans la société les seuls à dire ça.
If I'm looking at our society, Catholics are the unique to say that thing of the person.
Les autres religions, on pourrait dire les autres religions parce qu'il y a le critère de l'animation tardive de l'embryon.
For other religions, there are other concepts of the vivification of the embryo.
Late animation.
Late animation of the embryo.
Voilà.
Okay. Thank you.
Voilà, et c'est tout. Donc c'est un impératif de respect, je trouve, et qui parle de notre propre condition, puisque nous avons tous été des embryons. Donc quand nous parlons de l'embryon, nous parlons de nous-mêmes. Voilà.
So this is imperative when we are speaking of the embryo. It was our first condition. We were all embryos, so we are starting from this position, and we're considering the embryos with this potential to become persons.
Anyone from the floor want to come in with a different position from the two? Peter has just transferred himself from the floor. That's fine. Please do. No, please do. Please do.
First, I think we won't find in this room the solution about a topic which is discussed since whenever. Nevertheless, it was interesting, and I think I would like to get a meta perspective, because here we had two very distinguishedly different positions. In one way, that Robin said that it is material, you mentioned, and compared to other bodily material, and you said, well, respect the embryos as a person. And I think we have also different positions in between, and then depends on the point David made, because it is not only a question of ontological or empiric entities, but primarily a question of recognition, and the main difference may be how you see the connects between the, let's say, bodily backing of this recognition towards this kind of recognition. That is the difference point, and perhaps solutions or coping with that difference could work in a way that this meta perspective should be regarded and recognized. And well, I think we won't get a solution. I could jump in and present also my in between. I won't do that. But we have, once again, perhaps to be honest, to remind all of us that what is going on in countries where we do have these embryo using research, normally the outcome is used in all countries. To be honest,
Can I make
please.
Just another quick point, just to confuse people even more. The fact that you can now induce pluripotent stem cells. You can take a skin cell from an adult person, reprogram it back into a very early embryonic state, from which you can then generate tissues. You can generate structures that actually look remarkably like early human embryos. Yeah, sheaths. So that again, it just says, well, opens up, confuses people again, because this is an embryo-like structure that has come from an adult person. It's not a new person. So just think about that one as well.
Lots of grey areas and blurry lines. I'm going to move to a quotation, or at least part of a quotation from Peter's talk, a definition of sin, or at least a description of sin, and not many people are brave enough to attempt either. What I wrote down, and this is close enough to what I think you said, sin is a radical incoherence with one's own essential vocation and gifts. from Karl Barth. Yeah? Sin is a radical incoherence with one's own essential vocation and gifts. Miltiades. How does the scientist sin? Given that definition, if the definition of sin is a radical incoherence with one's essential vocation and gifts, and the scientist is given the gifts and the vocation to do science in this area, how does he fulfill, or how does she fulfill her or his vocation?
So I would define sin in another way. I would say...
You probably would, but I'm asking you about this one.
For a moment.
It's Western theology, I know. No, okay.
Can you repeat the
give
question?
your definition of sin.
No, please repeat the question once again, and I try to give an answer.
Okay, and then we will allow you to give your definition of sin as well.
Thank you.
Sin, the radical incoherence with one's own essential vocation and gifts. So assuming that the scientist has the vocation and gifts to do science, as Robin is doing, how would Robin avoid sin? In this area only.
Well, in that case, we speak about the ethics of responsibility. As humans, we have our ethics, views, and our responsibility, and we should behave according to our responsibility towards the society, the embryo, and so on. And in that case, according to this point of view, is of course understandable that sin is something that goes beyond that perception. It is something that goes against the views that one has in the context of doing things as genetic modification.
Okay, thank you. Peter, it was your quotation, at least you quoted it anyway. Your comment on scientists' vocation and gifts.
Well, I could repeat the last part of my presentation, because I differentiated 3 forms of sin, of not meeting one's own vocation and gifts. And this, I found, was the fascinating aspect of Karl Barth's differentiation, that we shouldn't say we have the one and only vocation and the one and only gifts, and we have different forms of not meeting them. And there I mentioned, on the one hand, and this seems at the moment for me a real challenge for most scientists, that due to the special frame and also mood of communications we currently face, they how to say, overdrive their ambitions in a way that, especially in America, a lot of scientists they offer the solution of nearly all mankind's problem, and in many papers, especially in this form of publications in Science and Nature, every scientific discovery has to be a huge breakthrough and offering all solutions, and this leads to the effect that the general public must become disappointed, because all of these prospects can't be fulfilled, and that causes distrust. And I think this is a temptation for a scientist, because they need the public attentions, and you get the public attention, especially in times where we have these tendency towards fake news and also to the big headlines to present their results in that manner. And I think this is a paradox situation. And I think this is, at the moment, one of the biggest temptations, not to say sin, for science in general and scientists in working in the environment of science.
Thank you, Robin. I will give you a chance to respond to this, put slightly differently. Any other comments from the floor, from the body of the hall, Jackie?
A couple of thoughts, I suppose, but one is that it's interesting listening to this in the sense that scientists have a vocation, many religious people have a vocation, scientists have a career and a profession and often a business to run, or an institute to run. So does the church. The church has an operation and finances of that operation to run too. So in both cases, there's a tension, and I think we're much readier to see it within the scientific domain than we're willing to admit that it happens in the religious church spiritual domain. There's a tension between the thing that drove you into this world in the first place, to be working in this job, and how you manage to maintain that over time so that you continue to be able to do that job, serve your parishioners, serve the rest of the community, and so on. And I think, going back slightly to one of the points we made earlier, which I didn't think of at the time, is that one of the roles of the relationship, potential roles of the relationship between church and science, is for the church to act as a kind of critical friend in the sense of asking the questions, not should we be doing this, but what are we hoping to get out of doing this? What are we aiming for out of doing this? Because as you rightly said, there's a sense in which there's been a collapse, I think, of our ideas of what a flourishing life, what a good life is about, into, well, it's a healthy life. You know, it's a normal life, it's a long-lived life. And that can be part of it, and that, in a sense, is what science and biomedicine is doing. But it's not the whole story. And the church and spirituality, I suppose, can act as a reminder. This is a very big part of the good life, the flourishing life, but it's not the whole story. And we're in danger if you let it become the overriding driver of those goals.
Thank you, Robin. Then I want to get two quick questions in before we finish. Okay. Robin, your sense of vocation, and do you sometimes feel it would be a sin if you didn't fulfill it?
Interesting. I like Jackie's response just then. I mean, we live in a world which is, as a scientist, we live in a world which is very competitive. It's competitive because we have other scientists trying to do the same thing as we're doing. We're competing for money to do the research. The institutions we work for want us to do well, and so you get incentives which are not quite reasonable. I mean, they're the sort of incentives which are verging on sinning sometimes. So, if you like, if I can say that, I hate it. I hate it as much as you do. I think it's terrible. I think the hype that comes with certain scientists and certainly their university or institution or press office is it's ridiculous, and it's distorting things. It's leading to this issue of problems of reproducibility. So a lot of these papers published in some of the high-profile journals, like Nature, Science, and Cell, don't get reproduced, and it's because the pressure on the scientists has been so much that they've hurried the experiments, they haven't done it properly, and everyone's busy, and the papers haven't been reviewed properly. So it's time that things changed, and there are moves to change things, and of course, this whole idea of, first of all, open access, I think, is helpful, but not just open access, but, if you like, to do away with journal impact factors, to do away, just to have the science published naked, if you like, as it is, and then it's assessed by the community. So it's published first, then reviewed. I think this is going to be happening more and more. It started happening. It's going to be happening more and more, and I think that will hopefully help us not sin so much, if you want to put it that way. But I agree with you. It's a big issue.
Thank you, and thank you for using the S word in a creative way. Much appreciated. We've time for just one more question because we do want to have dinner.
Julia?
Oh, Julia, sorry. How dare I?
A small question, because we are discussing, and I think it's linked to what you said right now and what you said before, considering the fake news. We are speaking too much about the fake news, but I'm starting to think, who will be deciding what the fake news is the fake news and which fake news is not the fake news? So we are on...
Yeah, and if we get the answer to that, there will be no more fake news. But thank you. Last question, which is not altogether a serious one, because people have done very well being very serious and thinking very hard. I want you to imagine just for a few moments that in the days of your parents, when you were in utero, human enhancement was actually possible. And if you could go back in time and decide, what little bit of human enhancement would I like for myself? What would it be? Just to make it easy for you, I can say mine very easily, which would be to have been a much better footballer and to have played for Manchester United. So it's very simple. I'm not sure what would have to be enhanced to do that, but that's where I would go. Miltiades, what would you like to have enhanced?
That is tempting. Of course, every human has desires, and we all want to be better. And if it is an easy way to do that, everyone would immediately say, "Why not?" And if, as you put it, if it could be something in the past without my effort, and the outcome is that I'm better now, I think that everyone would say, "Why not?" Yes, of course. But it is provocative, of course, the question, but it is not so easy, the positive answer, because there are many problems with enhancement. In my position, I was against, and I said which are the difficulties and which are the problems.
Okay, we've 3 minutes left, so you are perfect just as you are. I fully understand. Robin?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I can give maybe a couple of different alternatives, but, I'm hopeless at languages. If I could be enhanced to allow me to speak other languages, that would be great. We have no idea how to do that, so that's safe. In a way, it would be valuable for humanity if we were able to photosynthesize, so we didn't have to consume so much food, so we could just, live like plants.
I like that. One totally selfish and one completely selfless answer.
Exactly.
Well done.
That's the issue about enhancement. So enhancement can be, of course, done for the good of the individual or the good of society. And so, in the way, enhancements for the good of society are much more acceptable, I think. So it's like college students taking a drug Ritalin so they can stay awake and study more and do better at their exams, versus do you give Ritalin to the school bus driver and the airline pilot so they don't fall asleep at their job? So that's
interesting thought. Peter, you have 90 seconds.
Long distance space travel, I think, is another thing. We would need to be enhanced to do that. So.
There we are.
You can send me into outer space.
We've got 3 for the price of 1 and none for the price of 1. Peter, 90 seconds. What, if anything, would you wish to have enhanced?
So, wasn't the idea of the human person to keep the mystery? So I like to keep the mystery. What
would you like to enhance the mystery?
No. And then against this background, my parents have forgotten my wings. So that's of course of importance, and they've forgotten to introduce the feature not to cut the telomeres as soon as it happens. So, which means, in effect, I would like to live a little bit longer than hopefully 100 years. No, 150, but 150 is fine. Because then I want my children, of course, to run the world.
After that, you're repeating everything, aren't you? After 150 years, you've seen it all.
Exactly. Then
ladies and gentlemen, please show your appreciation to our panel and to your good selves.